I'm the current dietitian at Spinal Rehab, and before this I worked in New Zealand in the community, so I mostly saw people at home, and so I've been working in the spinal cord injury area for about 5 years now, and yeah, I've done a lot of nutrition related stuff in this area. I had prepared a presentation if you want, but I'm also happy to take questions or have it more as a Q&A. So it's really up to you how you want to run this. Okay. So this is just an overview. Why is good nutrition important? We're going to talk about what good nutrition looks like. I included a section on ultra-processed foods because there was some interest in fast foods, and I would kind of put that into the broader umbrella of ultra-processed foods. Then looking at food, weight, and health after a spinal cord injury, and then long-term health afterwards. So that I included some information about bone health and cholesterol, and just a very one slide about pressure injury prevention. So why is good nutrition important? It keeps the body working as well as it can. It helps to fight infections. So if you've got nutrient deficiencies, that can make it more likely that you'll get an infection. Helps to maintain weight, prevents malnutrition. It also helps to prevent and heal pressure injuries and wounds. Improves general well-being. If you're well nourished, you generally just feel better, and food can also have a fairly significant effect on mood. And it helps to prevent long-term complications like diabetes, heart disease, osteoporosis, but also things like constipation and bowel dilation. So what is a healthy diet? There are many different ways to have a healthy diet. There's not just one way to do this. So a healthy diet is adequate, so it has enough of each kind of food. It's balanced, so it doesn't have too much. You're not tipping the scales for any one particular kind of food. It's moderate, so not too many calories, not too much fat, sugar, salt. It includes a variety of foods from all of the food groups. And it's good to know there's no dietary guidelines specifically for people with spinal cord injuries. So it's really just looking at adapting whatever guideline you're looking at, whether that's the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating or another country's guidelines. So ultra-processed foods. What are ultra-processed foods? They're also called discretionary choices in the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. They're not essential for health. So usually these foods are relatively low in nutrients. They don't have a lot of vitamins or minerals. They're often low in protein. But they are high in saturated fat. They've got a lot of energy. They often have added sugar, added salts, or alcohol. I would put into this category as well. They're very easy to overeat. So these foods are very more-ish. They really just stimulate our brain in the right way that we just want to keep picking at them. And they're associated with an increased risk of weight gain and chronic diseases. So examples, I'm sure you can think of many examples: cakes, biscuits, pastries, soft drinks, sausages, ice cream, all of those kinds of things. So why do they contribute to weight gain? It's really all about caloric density. So caloric density is the number of calories in a food for a given weight or volume. A lower calorie density food helps to keep you feeling full without adding a lot of extra energy. So to just imagine this, you can think about what would be more filling if you ate 5 whole apricots or if you ate 5 dried apricots. They would both have 85 calories, but you'd probably feel a lot more full having eaten the 5 whole apricots, and that's because they're lower calorie density. They've got more water, they've got, really with this example, they've got more water, so you've taken the water out of the dried apricots, so they've got similar amounts of fiber and sugar and that kind of thing, but you could probably eat more than 5 dried apricots, whereas you might struggle to eat more than 5 whole apricots in a single sitting. Low calorie density foods generally have less fat, and they usually have more water content and more fiber, which helps you keeps you feeling full and satisfied, because your stomach senses volume and how full it is. It doesn't really sense how many calories you've eaten. So just to think about energy density in terms of nutrients, this is a little bit more chemistry. So carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram, and that little picture, that's sucrose. So that is the chemical structure for table sugar. Proteins are these long chains of amino acids, and they also have about 4 calories per gram of protein. Fats, you can see, they're these really long, complicated chains of carbon and hydrogen, and we get the energy from these foods when we break those bonds apart. That's how our body gets the energy. And because there's so much carbon and hydrogen, and there's so many bonds for us to pull apart for that energy, fat has 9 calories per gram. And then alcohol has 7 calories per gram. So foods that have low calorie density are things like non-starchy vegetables, lean meats, chicken, fish, eggs, fruit, because they're high in fiber and water, low-fat milk and yogurt because they have the fat taken out of them, so that reduces the calorie density. And if they don't have added sugar, so if we are adding sugar, obviously we're adding more stuff that has calories into it. Starchy vegetables also, sometimes they get a bit of a bad rap, but potatoes, beans, root vegetables, they're relatively low calorie density foods. And then sugar-free drinks, so water, coffee, tea. And the picture on this slide just kind of gives you an idea of how full your stomach might feel if you ate higher caloric density foods versus lower caloric density foods. So identifying processed foods, we were talking about ultra processed foods. So you can kind of see the minimally processed would be the fresh ingredients. So corn, apples, a potato, a carrot. Processed, the reason I don't say, oh, processed foods are bad, processed foods can be really convenient, and they can also be quite nutritious. So canned corn is not really significantly different than corn on the cob. It might have a little bit of added salt for preservation, but usually it's pretty similar. Whereas corn chips, they're heavily processed. You've dried out the corn, you've ground it all up, you've mushed it together into a completely different thing, and probably added some salt as well. Same with a potato. Like, a potato is just a potato, but most people wouldn't eat just a potato, so you'd probably bake it or roast it or something like that. So that'd be minimally processed. But then if you take it and you chop it into little pieces, and then you put it in oil and deep fry it, and then you add salt, that's adding a lot of extra calories and a lot of extra stuff to it to make it that ultra processed food. So fast food. It is some of the most calorie dense food that is available. That's one of the reasons that it is so palatable and tastes so good. A fast food meal typically has about 2 times the amount of calories as something that you cook yourself at home. That's usually because it has high amounts of fat. So a lot of fast food includes deep fried foods, fatty meats, higher fat condiments like mayonnaise, often high fat dairy if you're having something like a milkshake. And also they tend to have high amounts of simple carbohydrates that then break down into sugars. So like the white bread or the bun or the pizza base. Those are really simple carbohydrates that your body can easily pull apart for energy. And also the sugary drinks. A lot of fast food meals come with a soft drink, which is quite high in calories as well. And that makes it really hard to stick to your calorie budget for the day. So why do we care? So after a spinal cord injury, the energy needs of the body are lower because there's less muscle mass, less bone mass demanding that energy. And having too many discretionary foods can lead to weight gain, and also the saturated fat can increase cholesterol, which is a real risk. The other issue is that these foods often displace more nutritious foods. So if we're going to Hungry Jack's, we're probably also not going to be having a salad. There's no reason to completely eliminate these foods. I would never say, oh, just never eat that again. But it's really important to think about moderate intake and also eating these foods for enjoyment. These are really highly palatable, rewarding foods for our brain. So it's important to if you're going to have them in an enjoyable way. Don't just kind of jam them down because it's easy. And even healthy, high fat foods like avocado, nuts, olive oil, they can contribute to weight gain as well if you eat too much or too often. So it's not that these foods are bad or anything, it's just that they're higher in calories than you might want to have on a daily basis. And I just wanted to touch on alcohol, because alcohol is also very calorie dense. So it's a drug that slows down our brain and nervous system. And it also increases the risk of some cancers, and it can contribute to weight gain because it's high in energy. That can be a tricky thing to kind of wrap your brain around. So I like to compare the percent of alcohol to, say, the percent of fat in milk. So beer, for example, has 5% alcohol, whereas full cream milk that you get at the supermarket has about 3.25% fat. Wine has about 13.5% alcohol. A lower fat, like a coffee creamer, might have 10% fat, and spirits have 40% alcohol by volume. So if you compare that to, say, whipping cream, you probably wouldn't sit down and drink shots of whipping cream, but people do that with alcohol. And so it's really just that percentage of that energy dense thing that makes them high in calories. So standard drink recommendations, no more than 2 standard drinks on any day, and at least 2 alcohol-free days per week is what is recommended. A standard drink has 10 grams of alcohol, and at 7 calories per gram, that's 70 calories just from the alcohol itself. That doesn't include any mixers or any extra calories from sugar or anything else about
You get free alcohol.
Drink. Sorry?
Oh, it says 2 alcohol-free day. I'm just wondering where you get the free alcohol.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. One thing that's important to note is that drink serving sizes are often more than 1 standard drink. So a lot of times if you're having a beer in a bottle, for example, that'll be 1.2 or 1.3 standard drinks. So food, weight, and health. Do we have any questions up till here?
So with the alcohol, if we had to choose, is red wine okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, that kind of goes back to, I would classify alcohol as a discretionary food. So I would say whatever you enjoy the most is going to be the best choice. If you like red wine and you're drinking it because you're enjoying it, and you're having a beautiful meal with friends or your family, then that's fine. Yeah.
Is it proven that there is antioxidants, which I justify when I say it as well in a group?
Yeah, so there are more antioxidants in red wine than in other kinds of alcohol.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah. They probably don't compensate for the oxidative effect of the alcohol, but
I think someone's looking for a reason to continue drinking, Chantelle.
It was interesting. What was that last phrase or comment you said? Sorry, the what effect?
The oxidative effect of the alcohol.
What's that?
So, so oxidative damage. So when we think about free radicals and cancer, basically, oxidative damage is when some things that we eat can damage our cells. They can damage the DNA in our cells. So that includes things like radiation from the sun can cause these breaks in our DNA strands. Alcohol can cause breaks in our DNA strands. And over time, that can lead to cell mutations that then can grow into cancer. So the whole thing about antioxidants and eating lots of fruits and vegetables and things is that the antioxidants basically help to, so the oxidative effect is because these molecules get broken down and then they're very, very reactive. They just want to attach onto something else and have a chemical reaction. And the antioxidants, what they do is they provide something for them to do that with that's not our DNA. So that's why antioxidants are good, but we also don't want to overdo it on antioxidants because that can increase our risk of other things. It's a balance. So yeah.
If I could add a second one though, I guess the thing that's a must, like you spoke about breads before. So which would be your most preferred bread that I guess, I'm thinking wholemeal and multigrain is good. And then you spoke about your carbs, but I guess, you know, rice is a carb, but it's a low GI, which you get a longer burn, correct? So that'd be
Yes.
more preferable to have, so you have fuel to go out throughout the day?
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of feeds into what I was going to talk about next, which is more the nutrition side of things. Yeah, so I've got a slide all about grains, if you want me to continue
I'll
that.
pause there. Sorry.
Okay, all right, but feel free to jump in again. Body composition changes after spinal cord injury. So BMI is something that we often use to provide a healthy weight range, but it really does not account well for individual differences or body composition. After a spinal cord injury, you tend to have significantly higher fat mass and lower lean body mass than before the spinal cord injury. That's not saying that you have higher fat mass and lower lean body mass than the general population, but then before the injury, if you compared yourself before and after. And that's partly because of muscle wasting and partly because of loss in bone mineral density. So those two things contribute to your lean body mass. So you can see in the little man on the side of the screen there. Your body is made up of water, your fat mass, minerals, mostly in your bones, and then protein, which is mostly in your muscles. We can adjust the BMI range down to compensate for muscle and bone loss, which is something that clinicians tend to do just to give kind of a ballpark. And it's important to note that being underweight can also increase risk of malnutrition, infections, and pressure injuries. So you're not aiming for the bottom of the range. It's not a race to the bottom either. So this is just the adjusted BMI table that I would use clinically if I was going to calculate a range. So we would reduce the BMI range 7.5% for paraplegia and 12.5% for tetraplegia. This is really just to give you some reference data. If you're hearing BMI being thrown around, or if somebody says, oh, your BMI is a bit high or something like that, I tend to use these mostly for my reference, but I don't really find them useful for individual counseling. The thing I find more useful to think about is your energy requirements. So if you eat more calories than you burn, that's going to lead to weight gain. If you eat less calories than you burn, that's going to lead to weight loss. And the total amount of energy that you burn over the course of a day is made up of your resting metabolic rate. So that is just the amount of energy that you need to keep your heart beating, to maintain your body temperature, to keep breathing. And then the thermic effect of food. So whenever we eat, we need a certain amount of energy to actually digest the food. That's why some people get flushed and warm after they eat, because the thermic effect actually raises your body temperature a little bit. And after a spinal cord injury, that can become more pronounced because of the difficulty in regulating body temperature. So some people find that they really don't feel very well if they eat a large meal. And then also any physical activity. So that includes exercise, like planned exercise, but also non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. So that would be things like your transfers, like brushing your teeth, like doing chores, anything that's not really exercise per se, but that is getting you to move your body. With a spinal cord injury, your basal metabolic rate is lower because there's less lean mass and less nervous system activity to contribute to that energy need while you're sleeping, while you're sitting watching TV, all of that kind of stuff. And there are lots of different things that affect that. So your age, the level of your injury, if you have an infection or a pressure injury or something, that can also affect your energy needs. So there's no one number for everybody. There's a wide variation in energy needs. And the best way to tell if you're meeting your energy needs, if you're exceeding them, or if you're not meeting them is looking at your body composition changes, your weight, waist circumference, that kind of thing. So expected weight change post spinal cord injury, typically we see that people have a dramatic loss of weight immediately after the injury, and that's related quite substantially to loss in muscle mass and bone mass. But it's also because there's a hypermetabolic phase. So your metabolism just revs right up because your body's trying to figure out what's going on. And then you'll hit some kind of a low, and then it just tends to creep up over time. And this curve is not actually that much different than we see for the general population as people age. It's just that there's no dramatic loss in it. And that all has to do with the change in the amount of energy that you need, and the fact that we tend to eat with our eyes more than we actually eat with our stomach. So maintaining and increasing weight, I just wanted to touch on this. Some people find it very difficult to keep weight on. And this is because of discomfort with eating, nausea, difficulty accessing food can be a real barrier. Some people just really don't feel well, or they have cramps or spasms in their abdominal muscles that make it very difficult to eat. So in that case, you can use high calorie density foods to supplement the diet and try and keep that weight on. So looking at high protein snacks, so things like cheese and biscuits, yogurt, nuts, muesli bars, adding high protein milk, adding in cheese to veggies, or adding milk to soup or mashed potatoes, just trying to boost up foods that you're already eating and adding in a little bit extra can be really useful if you're struggling to keep weight on. The other end of things is losing weight. So losing weight is very difficult for most people. And it's usually more about identifying how, why, and when you're eating. And those things tend to influence how much and what you eat. So most people know what kinds of foods are going to be appropriate and not appropriate if they're trying to lose weight. But it's really hard, and cookies are delicious. And so it's not an easy thing, and it's really more about figuring out what's going to work for you as you. And it's important to have a variety of strategies. Most people rely heavily on willpower, but willpower and motivation, they swell and they wane. So you'll be really motivated for a week or two, and then something happens, and then that motivation kind of dies down, and then it can be very, very difficult to stick with a plan. Unfortunately, the magic pills for weight loss, there is no magical solution. So a lot of it has to do with psychology. So loss of appetite can happen because of anxiety, depression, pain. Also emotional or comfort eating due to anxiety, depression, or pain. And also disordered eating patterns, food fixations, picky eating, those kinds of things can also play a role. There's a lot of different eating styles or reasons that people eat. So emotional eating, I touched on a bit, that's eating to soothe or heighten an emotion. A lot of people think, oh, emotional eating is really bad, but we also use it in positive situations. So it may be something celebratory, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's more if that's your only strategy to deal with those emotions, that can become a problem. Ultra processed, so eating a diet that's really high in very processed, calorie dense foods, as we spoke about, that can really easily lead to overeating because those foods are very moreish. Mindless eating, so this is eating that we do when we're not really paying attention. It's just kind of, we're in a fog and we just sort of shove things in our face and we don't really pay attention to whether we're feeling satisfied, whether we're actually enjoying that experience. Often we're distracted by a screen. There's also food fretting, which is really that all or nothing thinking. I've had a biscuit after work today. I've ruined my diet. I'm just going to go crazy and have, a tub of ice cream now. Labeling, so we tend to label foods as good foods and bad foods. That's not actually very helpful when we're trying to change our relationship with food. Thought distortion, so thinking that other people are thinking negatively about you because of your food choices, things like that. Those all create anxieties around food, and if you find yourself using words like I should be eating this, so I would do that if I could have this and that would be good for me. That's kind of that food fretting, and that can create a lot of anxiety and really set up a negative relationship with food. Social eating, so I wouldn't say that that's bad, but we do definitely eat more when we eat with other people. And hectic eating, so having a hectic or tense atmosphere, if you're on the go, if there's conflict, if things are really busy and loud, we are distracted by those things, and that results in us eating more. We eat more if it's a hectic, noisy environment than if it's a calm, quiet environment. So weight management strategies. These are much more related to behavior than they are to the actual foods. I'm going to get onto the foods in a second. But it's really about identifying your habits around food and where that is maybe not supporting your goals. Reducing distractions and really focusing on what you're eating. Noticing your satiety cues. So are you full? Are you satisfied? Are you eating to the point where you feel uncomfortable a lot of the time? Noticing those labels, labeling foods as healthy or unhealthy, good and bad, really just looking at it and going, it's just food. You know, chocolate is just chocolate, a cookie is just a cookie, or a biscuit here. It's not a bad food. You're not a bad person for eating it. Really overcoming that all or nothing thinking, that gets a lot of people down. That I've ruined my day, so you know, I've had a terrible lunch, and so I'm just gonna eat whatever I want for the rest of the day, and I'll try again tomorrow. That can be really unhelpful. Considering portions, so how much you're eating makes a big difference, and a lot of us, as I said, we eat with our eyes more than our stomachs. So we look and we go, that looks like a normal amount of food for me, but might be more than you need. Eating smaller amounts of those really energy dense foods can be helpful. So rather than cutting them out completely, allowing yourself to have a small amount without strife can be quite useful. Some people find tracking is really useful for staying motivated, or having a buddy, and planning for the long term. So weight management is all about what you do day in, day out, week in, week out, not what you do once. Tackle the emotional side of things if that's something that you're struggling with. A non-diet approach dietitian or a psychologist can be a really helpful place to find some other strategies to deal with those emotions. And try one new habit at a time. So don't try to overhaul absolutely everything, because that becomes overwhelming and it's just not sustainable. So start small, work up. So now we'll get into the nutrition side of things, planning a healthy meal. So this is the plate model. You may have seen this before. It's pretty common. So ideally you want half your plate to be those non-starchy kind of vegetables, about a quarter of your plate to be protein, and then about another quarter of that to be your healthy starches. So things like wholemeal bread, pasta, rice, starchy vegetables, so your root vegetables, potato, corn, peas, those kinds of things. Not peas, sorry, peas are not starchy. And then you want to have 2 serves of fruit in a day, ideally, and 2 to 3 serves of low-fat dairy or a dairy alternative. That's mostly for the calcium. And ideally, you're going to be drinking mostly water and avoiding cordial, juice, and soft drinks, because those are going to be higher calorie density, as we talked about earlier. So vegetables. Vegetables are the best. They should be the basis of your diet, really. They're high in fiber, they're high in vitamins, they're low in calories, they have lots of different colors and types, and so if you don't like one vegetable, there's probably something out there that you will like. And a diet that's high in vegetables is really important for maintaining a healthy weight because of their low energy density. If you're including vegetables at every meal, it will make it much, much easier to manage weight. And ideally, you'd be getting 5 or 6 serves of vegetables. Most people really balk at that. They go, oh my goodness, I could never eat that many vegetables. But serves are really small, according to the guidelines. So half a cup of cooked green or orange vegetables, half a cup of cooked beans or peas, half a cup of sweet corn, half a medium potato or a sweet potato. It's really quite small. So if you eat a potato, you're having 2 serves of vegetables right there. Protein is essential. We need protein for tissue growth. And when I say tissue, I mean muscle, but also bone, and our other tissues, so like your eyes and your organs and that kind of thing. We need protein to grow, maintain, and repair those tissues. It's also an important source of iron and zinc. The dairy protein foods are high in calcium and B vitamins. So after spinal cord injury, requirements are the same. So it's 0.75 to 1 gram per kilo per day. What does that look like? It's usually 2 to 4 serves of protein foods. But if you overdo it on protein, it just contributes excess energy. Your body will just kind of push it out through your kidneys. So you don't get a lot of benefit there. It can put a bit more strain on your kidneys, and it will just add to weight gain, really. So good sources of protein are things like lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, tofu, nuts and seeds, legumes. Grains. So grains are important because they're a source of carbohydrate. They also contain some protein. They've got fiber, which is very important for good bowel health. They've also got folate, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin. If those are just random words to you, those are the B vitamins. And they've also got vitamin E, which is important for skin and our eyes, and potentially our immune system, and iron. They've been shown to help reduce the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, weight gain, and some cancers. That's whole grains. So that's things like wholemeal bread, multigrain bread, rice, oats, that kind of thing. And you need 3 to 6 serves a day. 1 serve is 1 slice of bread. So if you're aiming for 3 a day, you could have a sandwich and then half a cup of rice at dinner, and that would be your 3 serves in a day. So it's pretty achievable even with a small appetite. Fruit is wonderful. It's a good source of vitamin C, folate, fiber, potassium, carbohydrate, and ideally you'd be getting 2 serves of fruit a day. Some people worry about fruit being high in sugar, but it is higher in sugar than vegetables. But it's certainly not, it's not added sugar. So, and you need some sugar. Sugar provides energy. So fruit is not bad, and it has lots of other important nutrients in it as well. The one caveat is fruit juice. It's quite acidic, so it can cause tooth decay. And it also just adds a lot of extra sugar, because if you think about caloric density, again, this concept, you're taking the fruit and you're squeezing out all of the sugar and the water and putting it into a glass, and then you're throwing out the fiber. And a lot of the vitamins also are in and around the skin of the fruit. So yeah, juice is not ideal. So 1 serve of fruit is a medium piece of fruit, or 2 small fruits, like 2 apricots or a couple of kiwis or plums, or 1 cup of tinned fruit. Dairy is a bit controversial, I know, but dairy alternatives also totally fine. The main thing about dairy is that it's a good source of calcium, protein. It's also got the B vitamins, vitamin B12 as well. The recommendation is for reduced fat types of dairy, because that can just lower the amount of saturated fat. And again, that's related to caloric density. The evidence around heart disease is a bit more murky with dairy, but if you're really thinking about caloric density, then lower fat varieties are going to be favorable. Best to aim for 2.5 to 3 serves a day. So that's going to be like a couple of slices of cheese, 1 cup of milk or soy milk. And if you're not into dairy products, that's completely fine. But it is important, if you're using dairy alternatives, to look for ones that have added calcium for bone health. Fats. So fats are something that people are very scared of generally. They're categorized as saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. I'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide. But fats provide energy, which is important. And we also get essential fatty acids and fat-soluble vitamins from fats. So if you have a very low-fat diet, you could be missing out on those vitamins. Ideally, we're trying to replace foods that contain lots of saturated fats with foods that have unsaturated
Robert
fats,
speaking.
which can help manage cholesterol levels. A serve of fat is 10 grams, so for oil it's 7 grams, so that's about a tablespoon. For nuts or nut paste, it's about 10 grams, and you need 2 to 4 serves a day of fats just to be healthy. Your cell membranes are made from fats on the inside. That's what the little tails in your cell membranes are made of. So if you don't have some fat in your diet, you can't have healthy cells. So this explains a little bit more when I'm saying saturated, unsaturated. So saturated fats are up at the top there, and they're very linear, so they stack really well, so they're solid at room temperature. But having too much saturated fat in your diet increases your risk of heart disease because it can increase your cholesterol. Same thing with trans fats. When I say unsaturated fats, that means that they have a double bond. And you can see that affects the shape. It makes it more of a triangle shape. And that means that those fats don't stack as neatly. And so they're liquid at room temperature. And they can really help to reduce risk of heart disease and lower your cholesterol. So meal prep and planning and shopping. Planning your meals out and prepping meals ahead of time can really help with actually enacting some of your healthy eating aspirations. Other benefits include if you're planning your meals, you'll save money, you can shop more efficiently, which right now is really useful, getting in and out quickly or not spending hours scrolling through Kohl's online, and eating an increased variety of foods. So if you do plan your meals and you prep ahead of time, you can often go, oh, maybe we'll try this or that, and not always go back to those same staples that you constantly think of that are top of mind when you're going, oh, what's for dinner tonight? Mee goreng again. So online shopping can also be really useful. You can make your list and look online. It can make it easier to read labels if that's something that you're interested in doing. And if meal prep is difficult or you don't have enough care hours or something like that, some of the pre-prepared meal options are actually quite good. So there are some good ones from the supermarket, and there's also companies that sell those like Light and Easy and Tender Loving Cuisine. They have some really quite nutritious meals. If that's something you're interested in the pre-prepared kind of healthy options, there are some really good resources from the Baker Institute about pre-prepared meals. Supplements, I just wanted to touch on. So people that have had a spinal cord injury are much more likely to use supplements than the general population, but there is really no need for special nutrition supplements unless you have a proven deficiency and a health professional has recommended it. So the two that spring to mind are vitamin D and fish oil supplements. Those are the two that are more commonly recommended. Just to note, some supplements can interact with your other medications, which can make them less effective, and that can sometimes be quite dangerous. So it's really important if you're having a conversation with your doctor, your pharmacist, your dietitian, to let them know if you are taking supplements. And I couldn't really talk about weight without talking about physical activity. So physical activity makes it easier to maintain weight. It also helps you to control your appetite because of some hormones in your body that are released when you do physical activity. It can also give you a mood boost and improve your sense of well-being and improve motivation, and just generally, if you feel better, you're more likely to make healthy choices in other areas. Increases strength and independence, and the recommendation is to try and get 30 minutes most days, or a total of 150 minutes a week. That doesn't have to be planned exercise. That can be housework can certainly be included in that. But just trying to get some physical activity as much as you can is really good for your general health. How are we doing? Any questions so far? Shall I carry on?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
You said water. Generally, how much water should you drink? I've heard, 2 litres, 1.5 litres. I do drink, but I just don't drink enough, I think. I drink about 1 litre a day, 1.5 litres.
Okay, so I mean, it's individual, but ideally, I would generally recommend at least 1.5 to 2 liters of fluid that you're drinking in a day. And on top of that will be fluids that you'd get from food. So something like yogurt or soup, things like that contribute fluid as well. But in terms of just water or tea or coffee, 1.5 to 2 liters is kind of the minimum that you want to be meeting. And but it really depends on you as well, and you know how physically active you are and how hot it is, because if it's very hot and you're sweating a lot more, you need more fluid, or if you have a wound or diarrhea or something like that, you have higher fluid needs. So as a general rule, the way that I would calculate it clinically would be 35 to 45 milliliters per kilogram. So if you know how much you weigh, that's how much fluid you would need in a day. But as a general rule, I would say at least 2 liters a day is what to aim for in terms of what you're doing.
Chantelle, in saying that too, you can have too much water as well, because I've heard you drink too much, you know, it dilutes, you know, all the good stuff like salt and other vitamins and minerals as well.
Yes, yeah. So if you do overdo it on fluids, you can over dilute your blood, and that can cause, it's called hyponatremia. It's when you have too little sodium in your blood, and that causes nerve problems. So you really can overdo it on fluids, and that often happens if people are exercising quite intensively, or if you're outdoors for a long period of time and you're just drinking water and you really haven't had anything to eat, you're not replacing those electrolytes, then yeah, you can definitely overdo it on water. But mostly people tend not to drink enough, and some of that will have to do with catheter management. So especially if you're doing intermittent catheters, having a schedule for that and not wanting to do extra ones contributes to people drinking less, is generally what I have seen. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, we'll move on to bone health. This is the last section. So bone health. Osteoporosis happens. It happens to basically everybody who has a spinal cord injury because of the loss of loading on the skeleton from gravity and also from muscle contraction. This is called neurogenic osteoporosis. And up to 50% of the mineral content in the bones in paralyzed limbs can be lost within the first 3 years after a spinal cord injury. This occurs mainly in the pelvis and in the lower extremities, so particularly around like the neck of your femur and around your pelvic bones, which results in skeletal fragility and increases the risk of fractures. And these fractures often happen during really mundane daily activities with minimal force. So things like dressing, bathing, transferring, it's just much more likely that you'll get a fracture. And so this slide explains osteoporosis a little bit more. So a healthy bone has lots of little holes in it. And when your bones become demineralized, those holes get bigger. So there's less mineral and there's more hole. And that means that the bones are really fragile. And most of the way that our bones form and resorb is as a result of stress on them. And when you take away that stress, your body goes, oh, I'll just use all of this calcium and phosphate and everything for something else. I'll just take it out of the bones because they're not using it. So, so you just lose that bone mineral density. So what can you do about this? So electrical stimulation, so like a Fez spike, can significantly reduce bone loss. Also, if you have access to a tilt table or doing some standing and loading, that can really help to minimize bone loss. Vitamin D intake and calcium can also help to reduce the amount of bone loss and help to remineralize, particularly if, say, you haven't had access to something like a tilt table, and then you're looking at doing some of those kinds of exercises. You have to be quite careful that you don't actually cause a stress fracture and work your way up. And so having enough vitamin D and calcium in your diet can really help with that. And also physical activity, limiting cola drinks and alcohol. Cola drinks in particular are very high in phosphate, and phosphate binds to calcium. And so it will take the calcium from your body and get rid of it in your urine. So cola drinks can really significantly decrease your bone mass. And also smoking decreases your bone mass because your body needs some of the minerals to deal with the byproducts of smoking. So vitamin D. Vitamin D is a hormone. It acts as a hormone in the body that helps you to absorb calcium. Deficiencies in vitamin D increase your risk of osteoporosis, and there's a higher chance of deficiency after spinal cord injury. The reasons for that are not entirely clear. It could be a factor of getting less sun or needing to be covered up for the temperature regulation. That's a possibility, but they don't really know why. It also helps to keep your muscles strong, and it has a role in the immune system as well. So our body normally makes vitamin D through skin exposure to the sun. Some foods have vitamin D, so margarines and dairy blend spreads that have added vitamin D have vitamin D. Milk and some milk products will have added vitamin D, so I think the calcitrum milk has added vitamin D. And fatty fish, so sardines, herring, mackerel, tuna, salmon, they have vitamin D naturally in their flesh. Food sources alone, it's very difficult to get enough vitamin D from food unless you're eating a lot of fatty fish. So usually if you're vitamin D deficient, you will need some kind of supplement. And there's a blood test that they can do. It's quite easy to tell. Calcium. So calcium deficiency also reduces bone mass because your bones need calcium. That's the main mineral that's in them. And if you don't get enough calcium in through your diet, you need calcium for your nervous system and most importantly for your heart to maintain your regular heart rhythm. So if you're not getting enough calcium in through your diet, your body will steal it from your bones because it needs to maintain your blood calcium levels. And so you need to try and aim for 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day in adults and 1,300 milligrams as we age. So calcium in foods, you want to aim for at least 2.5 to 3 serves of dairy products or calcium-rich dairy alternatives. So that's a glass of milk, 200-gram tub of yogurt, 250 grams of custard, 2 slices of cheese, or dairy-free alternatives that have calcium added. Very few of the dairy-free alternatives are naturally high in calcium, but all soy milks in Australia will be enriched with calcium. Not all other milks will be. So almond milk and oat milk, you have to be careful and actually look at the label. There are some non-dairy sources of calcium. People don't tend to eat them all that much. So sardines or salmon with bones in. The bones are the things that give you the calcium. Or tofu that's been calcium set, has calcium in it. Other things that people tend to think of, so broccoli, spinach, cabbage, almonds, you need to eat a lot to get the same amount of calcium as you get from dairy. So like 16.2 serves of spinach, that is a lot of spinach. I don't know anybody that would sit down and eat 10 salads to get the calcium. That's not very efficient. Oh, I've got some animations. And then I just wanted to quickly touch on high cholesterol. So this is the other really diet-related complication. Heart disease is a major risk factor after a spinal cord injury. There's a tendency, this is also kind of unclear in the literature as to why, but there's a tendency towards having higher LDL, total cholesterol and triglycerides, and lower HDL cholesterol. So the LDL cholesterol is the bad cholesterol. HDL is your good cholesterol. And you can see in the little graphic, so the little green guys are the good cholesterol, the HDL, and they go around and they actually pick up the cholesterol deposits from the insides of your arteries. And then the LDL cholesterol, it stores cholesterol in your blood. So you need some of it, but if you've got too much, then it builds up plaques on the inside of your arteries, and that's when you end up having a heart attack or a stroke. So prevention, including oily fish, is really useful because it helps to raise your HDL cholesterol. If you find that really difficult, fish oil capsules are a viable option. Or foods and drinks enriched with omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids is what that stands for down there. And also limiting saturated fats, as we've talked about before. And exercise and avoid smoking. They're generally good for you. And then this is the last slide. So skin health and pressure injuries. So nutrients important for skin health are protein, vitamin C, iron, and zinc. If you've ever had a pressure injury, if you were in hospital, the dietitian probably came and saw you and put you on arginate. It has arginine, which helps to increase your blood flow to the area, and it also has vitamin C and zinc, which helps your skin to knit together. It's also important to stay hydrated for good skin health. So yes, that was a lot of information and lots of me talking. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
You provided us with a whole heap of information, not just around diet and nutrition, but very importantly related to spinal cord injury. So I wonder if anyone's got any questions.
Can I just ask, please? You said just at the end, the arginate, and that's good for pressure sores.
Yes.
Is that a tablet or medicine or?
So it's a powder that you dissolve in water, and it tastes kind of like, well, the orange one tastes a lot like Tang, if you've ever had Tang. There's also a lemon flavor. And so, yeah, it's just a sachet of powder that you dissolve in water and then you drink it like orange juice.
And how does that help the pressure sores?
So it contains an amino acid called L-arginine. So amino acids are the building blocks of protein. The way that L-arginine works is it actually helps to dilate your blood vessels. So it increases blood flow to the pressure injury. So all pressure injuries are a result of having reduced blood flow for a long period of time. That's the reason that they form. And so it helps to increase the blood circulation to that area so that the nutrients can actually get in there and help the tissues knit together. And then I would couple that with some counseling on getting enough protein in the diet, because you need protein to heal any kind of a wound. And then it also has vitamin C and zinc, which you need to make collagen, which is the main protein that your skin is made of. And that just helps the skin to actually knit together and heal the wound from the base up.
Thank you.
I think you mentioned in your presentation, a lot of people know, what is healthy for them. It's just bringing like a process for themselves to follow those rules that they know they should be doing. That's the hardest thing.
Yes.
So yeah, you need to have strategies, don't you, in being able to follow what you know you need to do. So maybe doing it with a friend or someone tracking what you're doing. If you're meant to be eating healthy or light meals or exercising those 30 minutes per day, that's really important. But no one follows it consciously, I think. I know I don't.
Yeah, so much of our behavior is just habits. So it's really not, most people don't make conscious decisions to eat in a way that's going to result in weight gain. This is not something that we really think about. So much of our behavior is just routine. It's just we do it because there are environmental cues, or there's other people that cue us, or it's just what we've always done. And so really reflecting on what makes it difficult, what's the challenge for you, what's going to be a barrier. Is it really that emotional component, or is it those environmental cues? Everything is really easy to access, or is it because you're stuck at home now because of COVID, and so the fridge is just always right there? Those kinds of things are really the things that tend to let us down. And so reflecting on what that is for you in your life is probably the most valuable bit of advice I could offer, thinking about what's making it difficult and then coming up with your own strategies that will work for you in your environment. because you can see a dietitian, you can talk to your doctor, but they're never going to know your life the way that you do, and the ins and outs of your day and what that looks like, and what your challenges are. And so trying to think about those barriers and how you can either work around them. So maybe you put foods that you tend to overeat at the back of the cupboard behind something else that you'd prefer to snack on, or maybe it's keeping a bowl of fruit on the counter so that you're going to reach for that and see it, or maybe it's if I'm feeling low, I'm going to call a friend rather than having a snack. Like, and that kind of accountability, having people to support you, can be really, really useful as well.
Is fast food, like, it's fast and easy, Chantelle, so it's probably a rule, isn't it? If something is too easy to make and eat, it's probably a question mark, as in for your health.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that. There are lots of really, really nutritious convenience foods, especially these days. So there are like the steam fresh veggie packs. You can just, I would consider them a processed food because the vegetables are cut, they've got some spices, maybe they've got some grains, but you can put them in the fridge and steam them, and you've got a really nutritious meal in the same amount of time that it would take you to make like a cup of soup. So it's not so much the speed at which it can be ready, but more what it's made out of that is the thing. But like even fast food restaurants have healthier options. So for example, a burger from McDonald's is not the worst choice that you could possibly make. It's reasonably high in protein. It's really more all of the extra things that we tend to add in with fast food. So it's the fries and the drink and all of those other accessory things that are not the main thing. Whereas when we eat at home, we tend to have like one main thing, and that's our meal. So
that's really true. I mean, talking about salads, a lot of people put dressing on it, and you could overdo it, couldn't you, with putting too much dressing on it. So your intention is good, eating a salad, but then drowning it with different toppings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and salad dressing is generally high in fat, so it adds a lot of calories. But I'd also consider, what would you be having instead? So if you're having a salad and you're making that choice, yes, the dressing is going to add some extra calories, but if that's also going to add satisfaction so that you don't feel hungry in 20 minutes, or that you don't feel the desire for something else in 20 minutes, then it might be worth it. Or maybe adding something that's going to be more satisfying to a salad, like adding some cheese or some nuts or something like that to bulk it up a little bit and give you some protein.
That's a good point, Chantelle.
Yeah, I tend not to like to set food up as a reward, generally. No? This comes from working with children. So if you set food up as a reward, or think about maybe training a pet, they always want that food then whenever they want a reward. So that doesn't really set you up for success in the long term. What I tend to think about is having those foods for enjoyment. Because one thing about food is that it's pleasurable, it's nice, it sets off all of the pleasure centers in our brain, it releases serotonin, and your brain is like, yeah, let's do that again. So if you're going to have those foods, I would say don't just eat them mindlessly on the go, which is something people tend to do with fast food. They tend to grab it because it's easy and they eat it in their car, or they order it in and they eat it in front of the TV, and they don't even really pay attention to how it tastes. And so I would say if you're going to have those kinds of foods, make it an event. Like, go, hey, it's KFC night. I am going to enjoy this. And really focus on enjoying the food and having less distractions. And yeah, I would kind of frame that as mindful eating, although that's kind of a bit woo for my taste. But
very true. You mentioned KFC, Chantelle. I was told by someone quite a few years ago, if you think about it, you have 3 main meals a day. So a week, is that 21 meals overall?
Yep.
So if you were to have KFC or McDonald's and all that sort of stuff, the person told me, as long as you eat consciously and eat healthy, why can't 3 out of that 21 be fast food?
Yeah, that's a very reasonable way to look at it. It's nutrition and diet are very much about what you do consistently over time, and not one meal or 2 meals a week. Like having 3 fast food meals a week is if that's what fits into your lifestyle, then that might be what works for you, and that's fine, because you have a lot of other opportunities to practice what you want to be practicing in terms of healthy eating and having foods that are going to be health supporting. And if you're getting all those nutrients from all your other meals, then yeah, there's no reason why you need to avoid those kinds of foods.
Yes. So you don't have to avoid all what's considered rubbish food, do you? As long as you're conscious of how much you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions from anyone else?
Question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My question is, if I don't snack between meals and I eat 3 meals a day, like breakfast, lunch and dinner, and don't have other snacks, why is it I keep putting weight on and I do a bit of exercise each day?
I mean, that could have to do with either what your main meals are made up of, or it could have to do with the quantity that you're having. So that could be related to portions. It's kind of hard to.
So for breakfast, if I have cereal, I get some fruit for breakfast. Lunch, I usually have a wrap with salad, and at night I have meat, a piece of meat, about the size of the palm of my hand, and vegetables. And I usually drink 1.5 litres to 2 litres of water a day.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. It just kind of depends on how big those things are, what kind of sauces you're using. I feel like this is a bit more of an individual troubleshooting question. That's kind of difficult for me to answer here. But like, I would say try and focus on the nutrient density of the foods. That's something that can really help. You might find it helpful to use something like there's an app called Easy Diet Diary, and it lets you enter in the foods. And sometimes it can be really useful to just get an idea of what you're doing now, to track your foods for a couple of days and go, actually, I am having more calories. And it can be really insidious in ways that we don't think about. So for example, having milk and tea, if you have 6 cups of tea a day, that can really add up to a lot of calories, but they're not calories that we really register. So if it's something that you're struggling with, I would say maybe try logging your food, see where that's falling in terms of like the number of calories in, and if that's really matching up well with what you're doing in terms of physical activity. And if you want some more advice, I would probably recommend seeing a dietitian to help tweak things a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Chantelle.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me. I hope you found that useful, and I'm happy to come back if you'd like to do it again.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chantelle.
Thank you.
Well, do any of you guys have anything to share about, what you do to control your weight and lose or gain weight?
I found, like for me, I needed to gain a bit of weight using an app to calculate how much calories or kilojoules I was eating was quite helpful. So I'll just put that app in the chat. It's Australian version, so I don't know. You can also like put in, the types of food that you buy, and it'll automatically calculate the calories for you. So it's quite easy to use.
Yeah. Jeanette, just was wondering about your thing. I think a lot of us try to find a solution, and we try a few things to lose weight, and some things work. I think it's important, and I'm sure you have as well, when you change your diet or your habits, You don't expect to see things happening in 1 month. You know, it's one of those things you've got to keep doing for quite a few weeks, and then you'll see changes being made. So if you're looking at gaining weight, you have to look and keep doing what you're doing and compare yourself or weigh yourself 3 months later or 4 months later. And keeping active, she mentioned 30 minutes a day. You know, that could be cleaning the house, for example. I think that's true as well, but it's important to set aside 30 minutes a day to do something that's, you know, going to get your heart rate pumping a little bit.
Yep.
Are you trying to lose it or put it on, Jeanette?
Lose it.
Lose it.
Yep.
So can we ask, speak to you later about it too. So you're doing exercise every day, you said. What sort of stuff is it? You know, dumbbells or, you know, are you working your bicep or?
Well, I've got a gym thing. I don't know whether you can see me, but
No, we can't.
I got gym equipment behind me. I don't know why I can't see it today, but I've got gym equipment that's got, you know, pulleys and what have you. And I've got a long deck that I roll backwards and forwards along. You know, it's sort of quite distance. And I do a little bit of boxing sometimes with the carer if she's here.
Yeah. So boxing's great. Anything like using a gym, like a home gym, that's really good too.
Yeah.
I think that's more about strength and bulk. Losing weight is probably not the, you know, that on its own wouldn't really do too much. So it's stuff like boxing. Boxing is great because that gets your heart rate up. Pumping. Going for a push, you said up and down the ramp, doing that a few times, that'll do it as well. So it's all that sort of stuff that gets your heart pumping. For example, you know, if you know how they do steps workouts, they step up and down onto a box. You know, if you compare that to yoga, for example, yoga is not going to make you lose weight. Doing the steps where it gets your heart rate pumping, that would work towards losing some weight.
Okay, I know.
Want to talk about anything else, or anyone else got any questions?
Something I've been doing is I've started to look at some of those fasting books, and I found that by taking up the fasting idea, I just don't eat as much. Like I mightn't have breakfast until 10 o'clock in the morning. So I've had a really good break overnight before I have breakfast. And often I'll go out and do Pilates, then come home and I'll have breakfast. So I'm finding I'm just not eating as many meals in a day normally as I would have used to have done. Where I would have had to have 3 decent meals, now my whole eating patterns have changed. Sometimes I might only have 2 meals a day, and they'll go down to a very small tea. I found that really worked well for me.
So is that maintaining weight, Gerard, or losing some weight? Is that what it's working for?
I don't need to maintain weight. I think I need to lose some.
Yeah, okay. No, that's a good point. I wanted to ask her about coffee. Now, it was on there. She had coffee on there, but I find when I drink coffee, not tea doesn't work for me, but coffee, it sort of fills the gap. I feel like I don't have to eat as much if I'm having some coffee through the day. So I could miss out on lunch, for example, or have my lunch 2-3 hours afterwards because I'm just not feeling as hungry because the coffee's actually replaced that spot. You know, it's some of that hunger's gone. I know if you guys do anything like that or feel the same with coffee.
Naz, it'd be really interesting to follow up with an exercise physiologist or something. Bone density seems to be an important issue in spinal cord
Yeah,
injury.
it definitely is.
And maybe, you know, talking about different sorts of exercise that can help in the wheelchair, or give another perspective of how to maintain your bone density.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, sure. I mean, she made a few points about what you say, keeping physically active, standing, the FES bike, was a
You
vitamin.
can't do that.
Sorry?
You can't do that normally. A spinal cord injury can't stand and weight bear.
No, she was saying like a standing frame, getting up on a standing
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
But also with the standing frame, I was wanting to do that, and they really, well, Stephen Hill was really discouraging that. He was kind of saying, with my age and possibly getting osteoporosis, and there's a big risk of fracturing my legs if I try standing. So that was a bit scary.
Yeah.
You've got to have a bone density scan done before you can use one of those, from my understanding.
Yeah, I think if you've got any concern, you've got to take the advice of the GP. If you really want to do standing, get into a standing frame, yeah, get a bone density test to see if there's any issue.
How do they do a bone density test? Does anybody know?
I think it's an X-ray.
X-ray, is it? Okay.
Yeah, so with the X-ray, just they can sort of see how solid the bone is, I guess. Because in one of the graphs, you could see the bones had a lot of holes in it, like a normal bone had smaller holes, and the bones that have got osteoporosis had larger holes in them.
But I'm waiting on trying to get a bone. I'm waiting on trying to get a bone density test now. If COVID had come along, I probably would have had it done. It's just getting somewhere to go, and because we live in country Victoria, we don't have the access to gyms like you do at Steps and those sorts of things. So you've just got to make do with what you've got.
Yeah, that's true. But you know, it's really important to, you know, as you spend more and more time in a chair, you know, the older you get, it's probably worthwhile having these regular X-rays. I know, do Austin organise these meetings, don't they? They have the regional clinics where they ask you to get an X-ray of your bladder and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, so they assess it when you meet them face to face. But they should be doing, like, as a matter of habit, doing a bone one as well.
Well, the biggest trouble I see in Warragul, you go to different X-ray places and they're not set up for spinal patients. They don't have enough room around the machines. They don't have lifting devices. So it's not as easy as ABC going and getting these tests.
Yeah, that's very true. I know I've had a few tests over the years. The places I've been, only because I guess they're Melbourne-based, they were pretty well set up. You know, they got more than one X-ray room, for example, and you know, they've got hoists available. They've got slide boards if you need. That's really important. As you get out into the country, they probably haven't got all those facilities that you would need. But just a matter of ringing around as well, calling the Austin or something and seeing if they know where you can get an X-ray or certain tests done. That'll be pretty useful too.
Well, I believe in Maui there's somewhere where you can get bone density done. But I haven't looked any further, just waiting to see when the restrictions lift, where I can go. But that's what I believe.
Okay. So what do we want to see next time we meet? Any ideas? Leanne, you mentioned the EP, the exercise physiologist. Did you mention that?
Yep. Well, I just thought it's a good follow-on from the dietitian and preventative.
Yeah. So I'll look into that and see what we can organise. Because we were so lucky to get Chantelle today, and she was fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good.
Very good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What about any other ideas?
I was going to mention about for the What's Out There Day, I was going to contact them and talk about this, but because they're always asking about ideas and stuff.
Yep.
So probably what I think I might find helpful is something about body temperature and regulation of body temperature and stuff like that, because mine's all over the shop, you know. So,
Yeah.
and I find like I get cold quite easily. I mean, I used to have trouble before my accident. I would get cold when I run out of fuel, and then I would eat something, and 15 minutes later I'd be warm again.
Yeah.
But I find that seems to be a bit more pronounced now as well. But as well, like before, I used to be able to go, you know, to 40, you know, 38, 40 degrees, no problem. Now it gets to 30, and I'm expiring. It's just, you know, terrible.
Yeah.
And I don't, and cold, well, I barely feel it, you know. I don't shiver or anything like that. The only way I know that I'm getting cold is the pain gets worse. So, you know, yeah, it's all over the shop. So something about body temperature and temperature regulation, and, you know, and what do we have to do when it gets to over 40 degrees, you know? So how do we have to be careful there?
Yeah, I'm the same. You know, I suffer from really cold and really hot as well, because temperature regulation is all over the place. If you're too cold, you don't realise you're too cold until it's too late, you know. And same with if you overheat, you actually don't realise you've overheated until an hour or 2 hours later, and then you suffer the rest of the day. Yeah, be good to sort of ask that question. Just trying to think who would be able to talk about that.
Even, you know, like if you get like people with injuries, you know, who've got lived experience, who, you know, even just share other people's experiences, and then maybe what do other people do to deal with it, you know?
Yeah.
That sort of thing, maybe.
So
I use a little heat pack. I find that's really good. You just pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes, and it's nice and hot. And you can put it on your legs or your knees, or I find my knees get quite cold even when I'm not cold myself, and so I'll put it on my knees. I usually quite often have a little blanket over my knees, so depending, I might put it under the blanket, or sometimes if it's a bit too hot, I'll put it on top of the blanket, so the blanket is kind of protecting my legs for a little while if it's too hot, you know. But I find the heat pack's very good. And then I'll throw it off if I'm right. Or, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, well, my feet get cold, you know, sort of. My feet are cold most of the time. If they feel cold, that sort of thing. But the bigger problem is with the heat, you know, like just getting hot. It doesn't, there's only got to get to, you know, not even 30 degrees. And it just feels way too hot, you know. That's the worst thing.
So the cold doesn't bother you so much. It's mainly the heat you're saying?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about with cold. So I think Jeanette asked last time about in the afternoons, I think she said her legs get cold. I had to leave, so I didn't hear what discussion was.
Okay.
But other people get that as well, like, you know, your legs or your feet, they feel like they're freezing, like you've got frostbite, you know, and the rest of your body's all right. And so apart from that frostbitey sort of feeling that you get when it's, you know, it's rogue signals telling you you're cold when you're not. I don't have as much trouble with being cold as what I do with feeling hot. My core will be like just boiling. Feels like just absolutely boiling, and then my legs and my arms will be, cool.
Yeah, okay.
So all coldish.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we'll see if we can get someone to talk about that in a bit more depth. Maybe it might be one of the smile doctors or something, if we can organise it though.
Yeah, we could do it on a What's Out There day instead.
Yeah, but like getting a special guest speaker to talk about it, or would you think just everyone online would be able to discuss it?
Oh, yeah, I guess, because when we do it this method, we can ask questions and talk, can't we? Whereas with the What's Out There day, you just sort of got to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. What's Out There days are like webinars, so you can only see the panel members. But we've got another one, which is probably bigger than this. Just trying to work out where we can get a lot more people involved. We run another community network for people that are in Metro Melbourne. Maybe you might be organising that and invite sort of more people into it.
Yeah.
Topic. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can get someone to talk about it, like a doctor or someone as well, that'd be good.